I just want to invite the man of the moment up to say a couple of words of, as we finish our day together, which it seems like it's both been a full day, but also really very short, actually. So it's bittersweet that we actually are going to wrap up now. But I wanted to give you a chance to say something in response or in general.
I'm going to put up a few of the of the cartoons of the speakers and I didn't have picture of everyone, but here we go. Anyway, wrong. That was Nargis. This is Lisa Corin, who is the director of the museum here, Block Museum, who's not here. This is Professor Faridi, who says there are two regimes of male gazes in Iranian films. This is Professor Fisher. This is Dilip Gaonkar. By the way, he was supposed to be the speaker, the moderator of the course, and he's the second person who came down with COVID. So, and of course the animator, the animation director. Where is Mr. Tawakkoli? Where is Mr. Tawakkoli? Okay, there. There is Nagar. Beggar's cloak over a purse of gold. Oil in Iran. This was the 11/17/2000. This is Nagar. This is Eric Patrick, the director of the animation. This is Rambo Vala, who designed the poster. And what the heck is going on here? Okay. This is this is Goldberg. Cinema as a contested public space in early 1900s Iran. This is from 2015. Yeah. Could have been, yeah. This is Ariel Rogers, who was here. What is digital cinema, she asks. Just to show you that I'm not trying to misrepresent you people and so forth, I'll show you a few of my own self-portraits so you can see that I take issues with myself. It's a doppelganger. It's a sad old man. It's a jumping frog or something. A very happy person. A very sad person. Okay, I think that's enough of these. Okay, look, I appreciate all that was said and screened during these past 2 days. Indeed, I'm humbled by them. My life and work have been enriched by my association with you and with your works over the decades. Oh yes, indeed, sorry, yeah. Over the decades. I want to thank all of you, my colleagues, friends, and former students, now professors, who made wonderful and insightful presentations examining and recognizing my scholarship, teaching, and film and media production, as well as my foibles. I also appreciate the vast efforts of my colleagues and friends in the Middle East and North African Studies program, Rebecca Johnson, Danny Postel, and Bianca Ramirez. Also, I want to thank my dear friends and colleagues in Screen Cultures program, my second academic home at Northwestern, especially Lynn Spiegel and Ariel Rogers. And I also thank Professor Shirin Rasooli and Nariman Safavi, who skillfully chaired the 3 panels and testimonials. I also want to thank my colleague, Eric Patrick, who made the wonderful award-winning animated film, and so forth and so on. And I'm just, unbeknownst to myself, throughout most of my life, I have lived with a set of personal allegories that helped shape my life, identity, and productivity. Allegories that were largely latent until I began working on my memoir a few years ago, before my retirement. As I wrote, reawakening the traumas of my own personal life during my long exile, as well as the national fears and violence fanned by the incessant hostility and proxy Cold War, hot war, and now cyber war that have engulfed my 2 homelands, it gradually dawned on me that I had consistently suppressed those things that caused me pain in order to focus on what I needed to do to create and nurture my own personal and professional identities in this global maelstrom. Hence my choice of the title for my memoir, one of them anyway, Like Water Through Stone, Memoir of a Melancholic Pesoptimist. I left Iran in the fall of 1963 to attend Lancaster and Markham College of Further Education in Lancaster, England. The extremely cold winter that year, the coldest in half a century, froze the pipes and made bathing at home impossible, requiring me to take a bus from my Scotforth house to a public bathhouse downtown. After tolerating a year of bleak weather, the General British Reserve in a small town, and my own inconsolable loneliness in the old Scotforth house on a tree-lined hill that resembled the house in Hitchcock's film Psycho, I decided to trade Lancaster for Los Angeles, which promised the warm climate and receptive environment of Southern California with its friendly people and massive cosmopolitan universities offering outstanding national media and film programs. During the next 6 decades, all but 5 years of which I lived in the US, I instinctively drove to not only delve into my old roots, but also to determine my new routes. These route and route dynamics worked themselves out over decades, yielding numerous publications, radio programs, sketches, television shows, film festivals, and teaching positions. Many of these books are not only about their ostensible topics, but also about their author during that period, moi, that is. And several of you in your presentations refer to these things, to this element of my writing. This is evident in the prefaces to all my books, which consist of extended personal narratives about my academic questions, research processes, theoretical stance, and my personal quest in writing the books. In some of these books, I took a step further by adding a personal narrative to each chapter, which tied my personal process of researching and writing to the topic of that chapter. Since my retirement in 2021, it has been the research and writing of my memoir that has fully occupied my time. During this in-depth review of my life, I was struck with an intense and overwhelming melancholy, infused with powerful senses of loss and latent grief. Those personal and internal forces to which I had given short shrift or suppressed to get ahead in the new land emerged in full force in my late 70s, incapacitating me for months, like an ongoing, overwhelming, and indefinable wave of emotions from which I was unable to escape. I'm hoping to publish this memoir in the next year or two. If you know any publisher or any editor that you want to suggest to me, I'd be happy to take that suggestion. Like all my books, this one, this memoir too, is taking much longer than expected to research and to write, becoming a big tome, and one that is still in process. I have only a few more chapters to write, but like a living organism, it is unruly, and it keeps changing and evolving. Here I want to share with you a tiny portion of it, which I'm titling My Personal Allegories. Learning perseverance and independence from myths. Camus' Sisyphus, Dad's single matchstick, and Tamerlane's ant. It comes from the chapter that deals with my first years as an undergraduate student at the University of Southern California in the mid-1960s. It gives you a good impression of what I was like at the age 19, far from my Iranian home, family, language, culture, arts, and society, a lonely seedling adrift in foreign lands. Now at 78, I'm looking back on that seedling for an answer to its survival, and dare I say, its flourishing in the new land, focusing on 3 incidents that became allegories of survival for me. My youthful alienation, anomie and loneliness, exacerbated by my relocation to the capital of American postmodernity and pop culture, deepened during my undergraduate studies in LA. The novels and philosophical works I was reading then, and the art house movies, such as all of Ingmar Bergman's desolate films and Godard's and Buñuel's provocative films that I was watching, intensified these sentiments, as did my gradual attraction to the emerging civil rights, anti-Vietnam War, and counterculture movements in the US, which offered opportunities for me to wrestle with my duality of roots and routes, to shape my own place and identity in the new land. What compounded my internal turmoil was my confusion about my future, my field of study, and my professional direction. Some 9 generations of my paternal family had been notable physicians and scholars in the Near East. But I wanted to branch out of those medical routes and instead seek a new route of my own. I adopted a stray gray cat that one day showed up at my apartment door on 31st Street, north of USC campus. Inspired by Albert Camus' absurdist treatment of the myth of Sisyphus that I was reading, the hero who, due to an infraction, is condemned by the gods to forever perform the meaningless task of pushing an immense boulder up a mountain only to see it roll down and then begin again his onerous task, I immediately named my cat Sisyph, using the French and Persian versions of the name. Sisyph was my first pet ever, and we got along well. But sometimes my childhood penchant for squeezing my little brothers and sisters' pinky fingers to show them my affection and to tease them took over me, and I squeezed Sisyph's paws. His reaction was swift and harsh. He bared his long, sharp claws and swung at me, scratching me and drawing a few drops of blood. Angry, I dropped him to the floor. Immediately, I felt the gnawing pangs of conscience and regret. After a while, in the same quiet way that he had come to me, Sisyph departed, vanishing without a trace. I was left forlorn, guilty, and ashamed, wondering if my impulsive reaction had been the cause of his departure and of my abandonment. Like a passing stranger, the cat had stayed with me briefly and then moved on. In truth, he was the adopter and I the adoptee. As much as I identified with Camus' thesis of the absurdity of life in The Stranger, I was attracted to his analysis that the mythic Sisyphus should be considered happy despite the appearance of futility, because he continues to struggle to achieve his goals. Likewise, I saw hope in Sisyphus's labor, not drudgery and hopelessness. The meaning of life is in the struggle. From this interpretation, I learned never to give up, to push through thick and thin like water through stone. Indeed, like water through stone, and Through Thick and Thin have been the tentative titles of my memoir. Perseverance was already traits in me, but they found confirmation in Camus' take on Sisyphus. My dad's single matchstick thesis also became a personal allegory for me, one that he explained to me on one of our early Friday morning hikes to the Sofe Mountains on the southern outskirts of my hometown of Isfahan when I was in elementary school. The gist of this thesis was this: don't worry about who else is holding a lit matchstick, a source of enlightenment. Instead, light up your own match to see your way and to chart new paths of your own. In the process, you might light up the way for others as well. This single matchstick thesis of my dad's, which I heard him share with others several times when I was growing up, was his own individual myth by which he lived, holding up the flame of medical knowledge and public service. Sisyphus and single matchstick offered me allegories of personal perseverance and productivity that allow the humble trickles of water to slowly but stubbornly carve the stones of life. My third personal allegory comes from an anecdote in my fourth grade elementary school textbook in Iran. This involved the Mongolian warrior known as Tamerlane in the West and Temur Lang, or Temur the Lame in Iran. In retreat from a formidable foe, Tamerlane takes shelter during a rainstorm, dejected and hopeless. There he witnesses an ant doggedly attempting to carry a grain of rice that is at least twice his own size up the ruin's wall to his nest. The ant tries time and again, and it fails in its mission time and again. Hungry and forlorn, Tamerlane keeps watching the tenacious ant until its 67th attempt, the creature finally succeeds in its mission. The ant inspires the great warrior Tamerlane to persevere in his mission until at last he succeeds in establishing the vast Timurid Empire in Persia and Central Asia in the 14th century. I clearly remember reading this story in my elementary school textbook and drawing a lesson from its simple but vivid story. I think I subconsciously modeled my life on the persistence that this story illustrates. All these historical and personal myths and stories suited my outsiderist personality and my ethic of individual hard work and individual responsibility. I consider, too, that these traits of individual perseverance and creativity in pursuit of ethical goals is an aspect of Iranian society and psychology, so graphically featured in the child-centered post-revolutionary movies such as Abbas Kiarostami's Where's the Friend's Home and Jafar Panahi's The White Balloon. I think I also identified with the utter loneliness of Sisyphus in his task, of the single matchstick holder and of the toiling ant, which personified my own native loneliness and individualism, now deepened by my life in exile. My relationship with my cat Sisyph was an example of that loneliness, but also of the freedom that Camus asserts that modern humans have, the freedom of choice to roam, to stay put, to come and go, and to determine and be responsible for one's own destiny. This freedom was both the privilege and the price of modernity and of exile, and I was becoming deeply modern. The cat had exercised that freedom quite well, clearly better than I had. I would do my own share of freedom seeking in due course. Just a couple more pages. Many intellectuals, including leftists in Iran, interpreted Jean-Paul Sartre's notion of commitment as political commitment, involving a pledge to oppose the reigning systems. The American and British engineered coup of 1953 against Iran's Premier Mohammad Mossadegh reinforced the power of Sartre's notion of an engaged intellectual, whose mission is to declare truth to power. The poetics and politics of this political engagement removed the distance that I thought was necessary for dispassionate observation and analysis. Instinctively, I preferred the alienation and internal struggle of Camus to Sartre's clear-cut commitment. For Camus' struggle allowed for the detachment that the objectivity and individuality of modernity required. I was then, and am now, suspicious of both religious and political collectivities and ideologies, which harbor cult-like and foreordained philosophies, certainties, institutions, leaderships, and practices. My attraction to non-hierarchical, democratic, and communal formations, such as my Naficy family Republic of Letters in Isfahan, which was formed during my childhood, my hippie Ellis Island commune in Los Angeles during my youth, the various intellectual salons of which I have been a participating member, and the editorial boards of cultural and cinematic journals on which I have served over the decades, stem from the actual freedom, creativity, and individual initiatives and expressions that these allow their members, while simultaneously providing certain collective comfort, security, camaraderie, and collaborative energy. None of these groups enforce dogmatic adherence to any single ideology, doctrine, or leader. Thomas Mann's massive novel, The Magic Mountain, as complex as a symphony, with its sanitarium setting in the beautiful mountains of Switzerland, reminded me so much of my childhood afternoon naps in our Darvoze-Dolat house in Isfahan. My dad often forced me to take a nap with him after lunch, the siesta time in Iran, particularly during the long, hot summer days. This was necessary because Muslims generally rose before sunup to pray, after which many stayed up to go to work, go to school, or to do homework, read, and play. So by noon, a person had already been up for a long time. Almost all adults took naps after lunch, and the children were cajoled to quiet down and to take a nap so that exhausted adults could rest and recover. For a while, my father took his naps in the living room, where the walls bore framed color photographs of snow-covered Swiss mountains and pristine blue skies and blue lakes and sky. I resented having to nap. I fidgeted or just observed the pictures, memorizing them and imagining hiking on the pictured romantic mountain paths. Thus engaged, I soon succumbed to sleep. Repeated on so many afternoons during my childhood, those landscapes were indelibly carved in my memory. Reading about Hans Castorp, the protagonist of Mann's novel, whose departure from the mountainous sanitarium is again and again postponed due to medical complications, and who would then find peace in the exploration of its beautiful environs, reminded me of those afternoon naps of mine. I was like a little Hans Castorp, unable to leave my sanitarium, the nap room, guarded by my physician father. Now, decades later, and continents away, I'm awaiting my nap time in the imagined Swiss Alps while spending the summers in our home in Polbridge, Montana, that we have named North Fork House. There in the afternoon, as each storm passes to the east, gorgeous double rainbow appears, arching over the river valley and hanging between our home and Rocky Mountain and the Glacier National Park, suturing these two experiences of mine in two different times, my childhood and my old age, and in two different homes, Isfahan, Iran, and Polbridge, Montana, both so far in time and space, and yet so near and alike. I have come full circle. That's where we are heading out to some of you were asking what the hell we're going to do. We're going to move out of our house in Evanston to go and stay there. You wouldn't blame us, would you? This is a house that we bought when we were in Qatar, sight unseen. How the hell did you learn about this house, Kelly?
Oh, I had been looking there for a long time. We had a little cabin, a little
Right.
tiny, no heat, no propane lights.
Sure.
And all that, and we loved that. I was thrilled to have that, for 10 or 14 years. But I was always looking for something else too, and I came into a windfall of some property that I turned into a conservation easement, and money from that bought this place. So.
But how did you learn about this house?
Well, I was always on the real estaters list.
Oh,
I kept sending me this.
you never told me that. No. Anyway, so that's our adventure. Thank you guys very much.
Next conference there, you heard him, right? We're going to hold him to that. I would love that.
It's big enough that could house everybody.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
That sounds great. We're booking our tickets now. I hate to say that we're concluding, so I'm not going to say that. We are moving to a restaurant to have dinner together. So it's just down Orrington or down Sherman. Thank you for pointing in that direction. Great. We'll see you then. Thank you.